Meat is Murder. It's a very direct political message, and I was already a vegetarian by the time that came out. But, you know, it converted a huge number of people to vegetarianism.
Certainly that way for 10 years.
Beautiful creature must die. This beautiful creature must die. A death for no reason, and death for no reason is murder.
We feel that popular music should be used in order to make serious statements, because so many groups sell masses and masses of records and don't raise people's level of consciousness in any direction, and we find that quite sinful.
What the Smiths brought was politics that you could actually completely understand. Meat is Murder, anti-cruelty, anti-Thatcher. It was just a brilliant approach to politics, really.
If the Smiths were anti-anything, it was the entire British establishment, particularly the royal family and Thatcher's government. Their 1986 album and its title song, The Queen is Dead, was their State of the Nation address.
The Queen is Dead, I think musically is one of the most powerful songs and has got a real sort of anger bubbling below the surface. For a certain section of people, a certain generation of people, that did have a real impact.
Few bands since the Smiths have so openly attacked the state, and their oppositional stance is still used as a stick to bash the powers that be, even if those powers profess to be fans themselves.
As someone who claims to be an avid fan of the Smiths, the Prime Minister will no doubt be rather upset this week to hear that both Morrissey and Johnny Marr have banned him from liking them.
David Cameron purports to be a Smiths fan, but I'm very sceptical that he actually ever was.
The Smiths are, of course, the archetypal student band. If he wins tomorrow night's vote, what songs does he think students will be listening to? Miserable Lie, I Don't Owe You Anything, or Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now?
I expect that if I turned up, I probably wouldn't get this charming man. And if I went with the Foreign Secretary, it'd probably be William, it was really nothing.
Are you saying that you can't be right-wing and like the Smiths?
I think maybe some people just don't listen to the lyrics. You know, it's like there's a lot of Tories that like Eton Rifles and don't seem to realise that it's not, you know, their school theme song.
The Smiths will always be remembered for courting controversy, but for many fans, Morrissey's political posturing, and even his literary lyrics, were mere dressing for the real art being produced by the band.
My love of most things musical is strictly for the music. The shit going on around it, that's irrelevant to me. Morrissey was going on about poetry and vegetarianism, and, you know, Johnny was going on about the Rolling Stones and T-Rex and the Stooges, and I was like, yeah.
Each household appliance is like a new science in my town.
Where does Johnny Marr's guitar playing rank for you?
I've seen him in the studio do things that are so simple on a guitar, yet so difficult at the same time, that does your head in. Do you know what I mean?
How hard is it to play like Johnny Marr?
It's impossible, you can't. You know, if you're making a record and the producer's saying, try some of that Johnny Marr stuff, you better get on the phone and get him, because you can't do it. That's not him now, by the way. He invented the style which I'd never heard before. It's a true original.
Johnny Marr's riffs are a thing of legend in British indie rock, but to credit him as simply a jangly guitar hero would be faint praise indeed.
Marr is without doubt the absolute gel that binds each track together. He somehow uses the guitar like an orchestrator uses an orchestra.
Classical conductor Charles Hazelwood was still a school choir boy when he recognised the sophistication in the Smiths' arrangements.
So let's say you've got, you know, a strummed semi-acoustic guitar, which definitely is a kind of binding agent. and then elements of lead just coming in and out, little bits of phrase picked out, the odd note, maybe a chord here and there, kind of shafts of different kinds of light being just exposed to the whole, just to add extra elements or qualities to point something up. It's a really, really brilliant and rare talent.
Morrissey and Marr were more Elton and Bernie than Lennon and McCartney in the way they wrote. Marr producing cassette tapes of musical arrangements, for Morrissey to overlay his free-form vocal melodies. Whether they knew it or not, the resulting sound tapped deep into our national psyche.
We're a melancholy race, we're quietly glum, but we're sort of quietly accepting. We've never had a revolution, after all. There's a kind of key element, I think, to the Smiths' kind of musical or harmonic or melodic style, which I think sums this up. Basically, that's a consonant chord, a basic chord in root position. Now there's an extra note you can add to it, which is that, which is a seventh. Now, either in its pure form like that or flattened, it's right at the heart of the blues. You know, it's the single most important kind of blue note in the blues, and it's sort of completely redolent of longing, of a sense of sort of dissatisfaction, which you don't find in a lot of other, you know, guitar-based songs. I mean, the Beatles were much less full of these kinds of chords than the Smiths.
The history of pop is littered with sad songs, but few acts have been able to capture this emotion and turn it into an arena-filling anthem, quite like the Smiths.
I wondered how many times people have either taped or burnt or downloaded or written out, you know, the lyrics to that song and sent it to somebody else. It's just a beautiful, brilliant, all-purpose, pro-forma love song.
Take me out tonight.
The core kind of anthemic quality that comes in the chorus, the double-decker bus thing. It's that moment when you've been all these kind of slightly murky chords, yeah? All with a little bit of dirt in them, and then you get that little break. And
if a double-decker bus crashes into us, to die by your side is such a heavenly way to die.
suddenly it's kind of like lovely primary colour, like a... You know, it's just a lovely phrase. Of course people are going to wrap their lungs around that, and we're all pulled together in this kind of, you know, this wonderful sense of mass sort of communal indulgence.
Halfway through, there's, you know, 6,000 people singing it. You're thinking, essentially, this is a song about death.
And yet, because it's the Smiths, it's got a kind of spring in its step. You know, it's E major. That's a nice, bright, open key.
Yeah. If you're going to get killed by a 10-ton truck, you want it in E major, I suppose.
I think you probably do,
and
you know.
sing along with it. I'd like an afternoon in a hotel with some cream tea and you playing this in the corner. And it's going to be raining outside.
We probably need to be in Manchester as well.
The universal appeal of the Smiths' hits travelled way beyond Manchester's city limits, as a fervent following spread amongst angst-ridden teens across the world. In the States, a gun-toting fan once attempted to hijack Colorado's airwaves in a bid to have back-to-back Smiths records replace the standard top 40 fare. He didn't actually make it past reception at KRXY Radio in Denver, but the incident passed into legend. And there are battalions of other like-minded, but thankfully unarmed high school kids across the pond whose lives have been saved by this perversely exotic group from Manchester, England.
I grew up in the sort of Bermuda Triangle where Bruce Springsteen meets Don Bon Jovi. a culture where, you know, you're expected to be a winner and sort of be on the cheerleading team and sort of be perfect and blonde and perky. And the Smiths were saying, you know, it's all right to be a bit of a nerd and wear spectacles and not have a date and sort of be on your own. They created a club of outsiders, and I felt like part of that club, even 3,000 odd miles away.
This world of Wally Range and Rush Home and 60s film references, did it resonate with you? Did you have any idea what this world was?
Oh, I was desperate to decode everything. So yes, I had to go away and find out what Tizer was and where Newport Pagnell was and, you know, Rush Home. But all these things were really romantic and quite glamorous. I mean, I just thought, if I can just get to Manchester, then all of my prayers will be answered.
Well, Amy did finally make it to Manchester and settled in London, where she's now the ringleader of a new generation of obsessive Smiths fans. She's written a stage play devoted to Morrissey, and every now and then she rounds up her fellow aficionados at events like Smiths Fest at London's Institute of Contemporary Arts to worship and celebrate their band.
Good evening, Apostles, and welcome to Smiths Fest at the ICA!
Mum was actually Morrissey's cleaner!
This is inside Smiths Fest, a very bizarre gathering of people. You can have your photograph mocked up outside a Salford Lads Club, or your quiff resurrected. Hi. Hi. All right, let's give it a go.
Burn down the disco, hang the blessed DJ.
Draw down, ready, and quiff up.
20 years since I last had a quiff. How's it look?
Hang the DJ, hang the DJ, hang the DJ. Hang the DJ, hang the DJ, hang the DJ.
Can I have a round of applause for my necklace?
Hang the DJ, hang the DJ.
Hardly Salford Lads Club, but the Smiths are going to be imitated, analysed and celebrated in there until the small hours. If quiffing your hair up and dressing up like Morrissey isn't your bag, we can all celebrate that it was 30 years ago this weekend that the Smiths invited us into their achingly beautiful, melancholic, oppositional world. It's a light which will never go out.
Sing me to sleep, sing me to sleep. I'm tired and I want to go to bed.
Like all the great bands, it's not something that you can sum up in one nifty sentence and say it's because of that. It's impossible. So people like you spend 30 years trying, and they probably take another 30 years. We'll still come back to the same thing. They were just fucking great.
Sing to me, I don't want to wake up on my own anymore.
There isn't a room to the libertines like this anywhere in the world, is there? There isn't a room to Spandau Ballet anywhere in the world like this. I mean, there is, whatever you think of it, it gives you an idea of just what they meant to us. I mean, I was going to say them, but us.
Deep in the cell of my heart, I really want to go.
It's easy to sort of go, oh, this is a bit silly, but this is an expression of people's love for them, you know what I mean?
You and I both know when we leave here, we can have a photo taken, aren't we?
I said that's it, just the...
I must be